My name is Stella Ingram. I'm 22 years old. Don't clap. I paid for that degree, not her, my father screamed from the bleachers, in front of 2,000 people, the moment I finished my valedictorian speech at Millbrook State University. I want you to hold that image. A man in a navy blazer, standing in a sea of sitting families, his voice cracking off the gymnasium walls, while his own daughter stood at the podium with shaking hands and a gold honor cord she'd bought herself. 2,000 people went silent. My pulse hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. But here's what my father didn't know. I'd worked 3 jobs for 4 years. I'd paid every cent of what he claimed was his. And the dean, sitting 6 feet from me on that stage, already had a file on her desk with his signature on 8 checks he was never supposed to cash. He thought he was taking credit. He was actually confessing. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me take you back 6 years. To the fall I was 16, the last week I still had my mother. My mother, Margaret Ingram, was a high school biology teacher who could make cellular mitosis sound like a love story. She's the reason I fell for science. Every evening after dinner, she'd sit with me at our small kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg she kept promising to fix, and we'd go through my homework together. Our refrigerator was wallpapered with my report cards, my science fair ribbons, my honor roll certificates. She taped every single one up herself. Our house was nothing fancy. A 3-bedroom on a quiet street in the suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, with a kitchen that always smelled like chicken broth and a backyard that needed mowing. But my mother made it feel like the safest place in the world. My father, Gerald, was a different presence. He worked as an insurance adjuster. Decent salary, steady hours. And he considered himself the provider, the man of the house. He never came to parent-teacher conferences. "That's women's work," he'd say, and my mother would press her lips together and go alone. He controlled the family finances down to the grocery budget. My mother had a small checking account of her own, her independence money, she called it, a quiet rebellion she never talked about at dinner. In the fall of my junior year, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She'd never smoked a day in her life. The universe doesn't care about fairness. She lasted 11 weeks after the diagnosis. In those final weeks, while I sat beside her hospital bed doing calculus homework so she could watch, she loved watching me work. She said something I didn't understand until years later. "You'll go to college, sweetheart. I've already taken care of it." I thought she meant spiritually. I thought she was giving me permission to dream. She had an old laptop, a battered Dell with a cracked hinge, that I packed into a box after the funeral and couldn't bring myself to open for years. That laptop would change everything. But I didn't know that yet. My mother died on a Tuesday. The kitchen went quiet after that. The week after the funeral, my father moved fast. He closed my mother's personal checking account, her independence money, and rolled everything into his own. He gathered her mail, her documents, her files into a single box he kept in his office closet. "I'll handle the paperwork from now on," he said, standing in the hallway with a stack of envelopes. "All the mail comes through me first. I don't want you worrying about bills." I was 16. My grandparents on both sides were gone. I had no siblings, no aunts or uncles nearby. Just one great-aunt, Helen, who lived 3 states away and sent birthday cards with $10 bills. Gerald Ingram was the only family I had left. When your world shrinks to one person, you don't question the terms. He restructured the house the way he restructured claims at work, efficiently, without consulting anyone. The dining table went from 3 chairs to 2. He sat at the head. I cleared the plates. My mother's reading chair moved to the garage. Her coat disappeared from the hook by the door. "A girl your age should know how to run a household," he told me one evening while I scrubbed a pot. "Your mother did it. Now it's your turn." I cooked dinner every night. I cleaned the bathrooms on Saturdays. I ironed his shirts on Sundays. I told myself this was grief, his way of coping. I told myself he'd soften. He didn't. And somewhere in that period, in those months when I was too deep in mourning to pay attention to anything but survival, letters started arriving from colleges and scholarship foundations. Letters addressed to me. My father collected the mail every afternoon at 4:15. I never saw a single one. Senior year, I applied to Millbrook State University, a solid public research school about 4 hours from home. I wrote my application essays at the kitchen table after dishes, the same spot my mother used to sit with me. I got in. When the acceptance email came to my school address, I printed it out and brought it home like a trophy. My father read it at the table, chewing his dinner, and set it down next to his plate. "All right," he said. "I'll allow it." Allow it. Like college was a favor, not my future. Then came the conditions. He sat me down that weekend with a legal pad. The man loved legal pads, and laid out the terms. He would cover the big costs. In return, I'd contribute $800 a month from a job. Your share, he called it. I'm not raising someone who thinks the world owes her something. $800 a month felt enormous, but I nodded. He was paying the rest, after all. That's what he told me. That's what I believed. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't know for 3 more years, was that there was no rest. There was no tuition bill with Gerald Ingram's name on it. A full-ride scholarship had already covered every cent. He told our relatives a different story. At a family barbecue that summer, I overheard him holding court by the grill, beer in hand. Nobody handed me anything. I'm paying for that girl's future out of my own pocket. That's what a real father does. Everyone nodded. Someone clapped him on the back. That fall, he drove me to campus in his new Ford F-150. Bought that spring with cash. End-of-year bonus, he'd said. I didn't think to question it. I should have. Freshman year, I became 3 people. Mornings, I was a chemistry tutor at the campus learning center. $15 an hour, mostly freshmen who couldn't balance equations. Afternoons between classes, I worked the circulation desk at the university library. A federal work-study position that paid minimum wage but let me study during slow shifts. Weekends, I pulled catering shifts for a company called Silverleaf Events. White shirt, black slacks, sore feet, carrying trays of crab cakes for people wearing shoes that cost more than my monthly rent. 18 credit hours, 3 jobs, 4 to 5 hours of sleep on a good night. My sneakers wore through at the soles by October. I taped them with duct tape and kept going because there was no alternative. My GPA at the end of the first semester, 3.97. By spring, 3.95. I made the dean's list both terms. Every month on the 1st, I transferred $800 to my father's account. He never thanked me. He never asked how I was doing. Our Sunday phone calls followed the same script. Did you send it? Yes? Good. Click. Once. Just once. I called to tell him I'd made the dean's list. There was a pause on the line and then, "It's just a list, Stella. Call me when you have a real job." I hung up and stared at the wall of my dorm room for a long time. My roommate, Rachel Torres, a sociology major from Phoenix with a laugh that could fill a stadium, looked at me from her bed and said, "You okay?" "Fine," I said. I wasn't fine. But I didn't know yet just how far from fine things actually were. I was breaking my body to pay a debt that didn't exist, and the man collecting it was spending the real money on patio furniture. Sophomore year, parents' weekend. My father came to campus for the first and only time. I'd been nervous about it for weeks. Not because I was ashamed of my life, but because I'd started to notice that my life didn't look like someone whose father was paying for everything. My dorm room was sparse. My wardrobe was thrift store. I ate ramen 3 nights a week. But I'd arranged a campus tour, reserved a table at the dining hall, even ironed a blouse I'd found at Goodwill so I'd look put together. Gerald arrived in his F-150 wearing a Ralph Lauren polo, aviator sunglasses, and the confidence of a man who believed his own mythology. I introduced him to Professor Diana Colton, my academic advisor, a sharp, patient woman in her mid-40s who'd taken an interest in my research. "So you're the one filling her head with lab work," my father said, shaking her hand too firmly. Professor Colton smiled politely. "Stella is one of the strongest students in the department." Gerald laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't really a laugh. "You think a science degree is going to help her? I keep telling her, find a good man, settle down. but she wants to play scientist. He leaned in, like he was sharing a confidence. On my dime. The silence lasted about 2 seconds, but I felt every millisecond. Professor Colton's eyes flickered to me. I looked at the floor. Later, walking me back to my dorm, she asked quietly, "Is your father always like that?" "He's old-fashioned," I said. She nodded, but I could see her thinking. A student working 3 jobs whose father claims he's paying for everything. A father who doesn't want his daughter to use her degree. Something wasn't adding up, and Diana Colton was the kind of woman who noticed when numbers didn't balance. The Sunday calls got worse sophomore year. They followed a pattern so predictable I could have scripted them. He'd open with money. "Did you send it?" Then he'd pivot to guilt. "Your mother's gone, Stella. I'm the only one left. Do you know what I sacrificed to keep you in that school?" And he'd close with control. "You owe me. Don't forget that." Every Sunday. Same rhythm, same words, like a liturgy he'd memorized. Rachel started noticing. She'd be on her bed pretending to read while I sat on mine with the phone pressed to my ear, answering in monosyllables. After I hung up, she'd watch me go into the bathroom and close the door. She never said anything about the fact that I always turned the faucet on. She knew what the sound of running water was covering. One Sunday in November, Gerald asked for more. "Send an extra $200 this month. The furnace needs work." $200 I didn't have. I skipped meals for 2 weeks, told Rachel I was intermittent fasting, and wired it. Meanwhile, Gerald was telling his friends a story about sacrifice. I know this because his buddy Frank Murdoch mentioned it to me at Christmas. "Your dad talks about you all the time, honey. Says you're costing him an arm and a leg, but he wouldn't have it any other way." I smiled. What else could I do? But Rachel, who paid less per semester than I did, and whose parents contributed nothing, sat me down one night with the bluntness only a true friend can manage. "Stella, you pay your dad $1,000 a month and he says he's paying your tuition? You work 3 jobs, I work 0. Something doesn't add up." I told her she was overthinking it. But the seed was there, and seeds, given enough time, tend to crack concrete. Thanksgiving, sophomore year. I drove home in a borrowed car and started cooking at 5 in the morning. Gerald had invited about 15 people, cousins, old neighbors, a few work friends. He bought a turkey from Whole Foods and had me plate it on our nicest dish so it looked homemade. "Don't tell anyone I didn't cook it," he said, and I thought, everything about you is performance. By 6 p.m., the house was full. I'd made the sides from scratch: mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cornbread, 2 pies. My hands smelled like sage and my back ached from standing since dawn. Gerald sat at the head of the table in a pressed button-down, playing patriarch. Before anyone touched their food, he raised his glass. "This year, I'm spending over $30,000 to put Stella through school. Who else can say that? But that's what a father does." Applause. Actual applause. My cousin's husband whistled. I sat with my hands in my lap. An aunt leaned over and asked what I was studying. I began to explain my biochemistry research, an enzyme inhibition project I was genuinely proud of. I got about 2 sentences in before Gerald cut across the table. "Research." He said the word like it tasted bad. "My money, her hobby." Laughter. A few uncomfortable ones, but laughter. I pressed my napkin into my thigh under the table so hard my knuckles went white. Later, while I washed dishes alone in the kitchen, my great-aunt Helen appeared beside me. She dried a plate in silence for a moment, then said, very quietly, "Your mother would be so proud, sweetheart. She tried so hard to make sure you'd be taken care of. You know that, right?" I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. "Thank you, Aunt Helen," I said. She patted my hand and didn't say anything else. But the look on her face, something between sadness and apology, stayed with me long after I drove back to campus. By the end of sophomore year, my GPA was a perfect 4.0. Dean's List for the 4th consecutive semester. Professor Colton nominated me for an undergraduate research position in the molecular biology lab, a spot that usually went to juniors and seniors. I got it. I called Gerald on a Sunday, bracing for the usual script. Instead, he surprised me. "Good," he said. One word. But from him, it felt like a standing ovation. I hung up and caught myself smiling in the mirror. Actually smiling. and hated that one syllable of lukewarm approval from this man could still make me feel like I'd won something. What I didn't know was why he was in a good mood. The Pemberton Scholars Foundation had just deposited the fall semester disbursement, $15,500, into the joint account. My father was having a very good week. That summer, I went home for 2 weeks before picking up extra catering shifts. The first thing I noticed, a new patio set in the backyard. Wrought iron, glass-top table, 6 chairs, the kind of set you see in home magazines. "When did you get this?" I asked. "Treat myself once in a while," he said. "Lord knows I deserve it." I spent that summer eating instant noodles in my dorm and picking up double shifts. Gerald sat on his new patio and drank iced tea. The second thing I noticed, and this one actually hurt, my bedroom was gone. He'd turned it into a den. Flat-screen TV mounted on the wall where my bookshelf used to be, a leather recliner where my bed had been. My things, books, photos, the box of my mother's belongings, were stacked in the garage. "You have a room at school," he said when I stood in the doorway. "You don't need to." I slept on the couch that night, and I didn't come home again for a very long time. Junior year changed everything, and it started with a broken hinge. When Gerald had cleared out my bedroom, he'd moved my mother's old Dell laptop into a box in the garage along with everything else. During my brief summer visit, I'd rescued it, shoved it in my duffel bag without really thinking. It had been sitting in my closet at school for 2 years. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Turning it on felt like hearing her voice, and I wasn't ready. But that October, I needed a backup computer. My own laptop had crashed during midterms, and I couldn't afford a replacement. So I carried the Dell to the campus IT help desk and asked if they could get it running. 3 days later, the tech called me. "Got the hard drive recovered. Everything's on there." I took it back to my dorm room, waited until Rachel left for class, sat on my bed with the laptop open on my knees and my mother's desktop staring back at me. Her wallpaper was a photo of the two of us at the state fair, age 12, cotton candy on my chin. I opened her email. Most of it was ordinary. Newsletters, school correspondence, a thread with Aunt Helen about a recipe. But in the drafts folder, I found it. An email to the Pemberton Scholars Foundation, dated March 14th, 3 months before she died. Attached, a completed application for the Pemberton Scholars Award, a full-ride merit scholarship worth $31,000 per year. The application was for me. Below the draft, in her sent folder, a confirmation reply from the foundation. "Dear Mrs. Ingram, we have received your application on behalf of Stella M. Ingram. You will be notified of our decision by August 1st. My mother was dying, and she spent her last weeks filling out scholarship applications from a hospital bed. I read it 4 times. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. She said she'd taken care of it. She meant it literally. But if I'd been awarded this scholarship, where was the money? The next morning, I walked into the financial aid office at 8 a.m. sharp and sat across from a counselor named Linda. My voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the strap of my bag so hard my fingers ached. "I have a question," I said. "Has any scholarship ever been awarded in my name?" Linda typed, clicked, scrolled. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't read. "Yes, the Pemberton Scholars Award. Full-ride merit scholarship. $31,000 per academic year, currently in its 3rd year of disbursement." The room tilted. "Disbursement," I repeated. "To whom?" "To the student account linked to your file. The account is in your name, Stella M. Ingram, with an authorized co-signer." She read the name from the screen. "Gerald R. Ingram." I don't remember what my face did, but Linda leaned forward. "Miss Ingram? Are you all right?" I wasn't all right. I was doing math. 4 semesters at $15,500 each, plus 2 more already processed. 6 disbursements so far, totaling over $90,000, deposited into an account my father had opened when I was 17. An account I'd never seen a statement for. An account he told me was for emergencies. "Has any of that money been applied to my tuition?" I asked. Linda checked. "Your tuition has been paid in full each semester by the scholarship disbursement." "So the tuition is covered. 100%, plus a stipend for books and living expenses." I sat back. 3 jobs, $800 a month sent to my father. The meals I'd skipped, the shoes I'd taped together, all of it. For a bill that didn't exist. $124,000 to date. And I hadn't seen a single cent. Thank you, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I walked out of that office and sat on a bench outside the administration building for 45 minutes, watching students walk past with their backpacks and their coffee cups, and I felt the entire architecture of my life rearrange itself. Sunday came. The phone rang at its usual time. "Month's almost over," Gerald said. "Send it early. I need new tires." I was sitting on my bed. Rachel was in the library. The dorm room felt enormous and suffocating at the same time. "Okay," I said. My voice cracked on the second syllable, barely, a hairline fracture, and I held my breath waiting to see if he'd notice. He didn't. He never listened closely enough to notice. "And Stella? Don't be late. I shouldn't have to remind you every month." "I won't be late." "Good." He hung up. I set the phone face down on my mattress and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the shower, the old trick, the one Rachel pretended not to know about, and I sat on the tile floor and let 6 years of obedience crack open. I cried until my ribs hurt. Not because I was sad, because I was furious. Because every hour I'd spent shelving library books at $7.25 an hour, every Saturday night carrying champagne flutes for strangers in ballrooms, every calculus problem I'd solved at 2 a.m. between shifts, all of it had been built on a lie. He hadn't paid a single dollar toward my education. My dying mother had secured my future from a hospital bed, and my father had stolen it and called it his own. When Rachel came home, she found me on my bed, dry-eyed, with a legal pad in my lap. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said. For the first time I told the truth when someone asked me that question. I sent him the $800 that month. It was the last $800 he would ever get from me, but I didn't confront him. Not yet. A confrontation without proof is just a fight, and fights with Gerald Ingram were designed to be lost. I needed evidence. I needed someone with authority. I needed the dean. I went to Professor Colton first. I sat in her office, bookshelves floor to ceiling, a framed periodic table behind her desk, the faint smell of black coffee, and told her everything. The scholarship, the joint account, the $800 a month, the 3 jobs, all of it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took off her glasses, set them on a stack of papers, and said, "I've been wondering about this since Parents' Weekend." "You have?" "A student working 3 jobs whose father claims he's paying full tuition. I ran the numbers in my head after I met him. They didn't fit." She put her glasses back on. "Stella, what you're describing is scholarship fraud. This isn't a family disagreement. You need to talk to the dean." 2 days later, I was sitting across from Dean Patricia Hartwell in her office on the 4th floor of the administration building. She was a tall woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm authority that made you feel like the building itself was listening. I told her what I'd found. She asked the financial aid office to pull Gerald's full disbursement history. Within a week, they had it. 8 checks, 1 per semester, each signed by Gerald R. Ingram, each deposited into the joint account. Not a single dollar had been redirected to me or applied beyond the automatic tuition payment. The stipend for books and living expenses, thousands of dollars per semester meant to support me, went straight into his pocket. Dean Hartwell closed the folder and looked at me. "Miss Ingram, I want you to understand, what you're describing isn't a family disagreement. It's theft." She told me the university would open a formal internal investigation. She told me to keep everything confidential. "If your father learns he's under review, he may destroy evidence or move funds. We need to be thorough." I nodded. I could be thorough. I'd been surviving on thoroughness for years. The last year of college was the hardest thing I've ever done, not academically, but emotionally. I knew the truth now. Every Sunday phone call, every guilt trip, every "you owe me" landed differently when you knew the man saying it had stolen $124,000 from his dead wife's last wish. But I had to play the part. Dean Hartwell's instructions were clear. Act normal. Don't tip him off. So I sent the money. I answered the calls. I said, "Yes, Dad," when every cell in my body wanted to scream the truth across the phone line. Gerald, meanwhile, was tightening the screws. He started demanding I come home once a month. To check in, he said, which meant to check up. He still had access to my original bank account, and he'd review my transactions like an auditor. "What's this $40 at Target? What do you need books for? Doesn't the school have a library?" He also started planning my post-graduation life, without asking me. "You'll move back home after you finish," he said during one of his Sunday calls. "Get a job nearby. Secretary, receptionist, something sensible. I didn't pay for you to run off and play scientist in some other city." He actually emailed me a list. Receptionist, dental hygienist, administrative assistant, insurance clerk. Not a single research position. Not one. Behind the scenes, I made my own moves. I opened a new bank account at a different institution, one Gerald didn't know about. I started routing my paychecks there. I contacted the university's legal services office and began the process of removing Gerald as authorized signer on my student account. One afternoon, Gerald called the financial aid office directly, asking about my daughter's tuition status. The staff, briefed by Dean Hartwell, gave him a vague, cheerful runaround. He hung up satisfied. He had no idea the walls were closing in. In April of my senior year, the provost's office sent me a letter. I'd been named class valedictorian, highest GPA in the graduating class, 4.0 cumulative summa cum laude with departmental honors in biochemistry. I held that letter in my hands and felt two things collide. Pride so fierce it burned, and terror so deep it made my knees soft. Because being valedictorian meant giving a speech, in front of everyone, in front of him. Gerald's reaction was immediate and predictable. He called within hours of hearing, I still don't know who told him, and his voice had the oily warmth he only used when he wanted something. "You're giving a speech? Good. You'll thank me, in front of the whole crowd. Make sure you say my name clearly. Gerald Ingram. I want everyone to hear who made this possible." "Of course, Dad." That night, I sat at my desk and wrote 2 speeches. The first was the fake, a polished, grateful ode to fatherly sacrifice, full of phrases like, "I couldn't have done this without my father's unwavering support." I emailed it to Gerald. He read it, approved it, and replied with a single line, "Finally, about time you showed some respect." The second was real. I'm not going to tell you what was in it yet, but I will tell you this. It didn't contain my father's name. Not once. I printed both versions. The fake went into an envelope labeled, "Speech, Approved." The real one went into the inside pocket of my graduation gown, folded twice, pressed flat against my heart. Every night for the next 3 weeks, I practiced in front of the bathroom mirror while Rachel sat on the closed toilet lid and listened. Most nights, she cried, "I didn't. I'd used up my tears in the shower a long time ago." The graduation gown hung on the back of my door. I looked at it every night before I turned off the light. That black fabric, that gold honor cord, and I thought, this is mine. All of it. Every thread. 3 weeks before commencement, Dean Hartwell called me to her office. The folder on her desk was thick, maybe 40 pages. She opened it and turned it so I could see. 8 disbursement records, each with Gerald's signature. Bank routing confirmations. A spreadsheet showing every deposit, every date, every amount. $124,000 across 4 years, methodically collected by a man who told everyone, including his own daughter, that he was the one making sacrifices. "The investigation is complete," Dean Hartwell said. "Every disbursement from the Pemberton Scholars Award was deposited into a joint account opened by your father when you were 17. He signed for each check as the authorized co-signer. No funds beyond automatic tuition payment were ever transferred to you." She paused, letting that land. "Additionally, your employment records confirm that you earned approximately $38,000 across 3 jobs over 4 years and sent a significant portion of that to your father as what you believe to be your tuition contribution. $38,000, earned at $15 an hour, at minimum wage, at weekend catering rates, every cent of it sent to a man who was already sitting on a full-ride scholarship. The university has referred this matter to the county district attorney's office, Dean Hartwell continued. Formal action will begin after commencement. We didn't want anything to interfere with your graduation day. Campus security will also be briefed about your father, in case he causes a disruption. Then she pulled something from the bottom of the folder. A single sheet, a printout of a letter the Pemberton Foundation had included with the original award notification. A handwritten letter from my mother, submitted with the application. I recognized her handwriting before I read a word. Dean Hartwell slid it across the desk. Your mother wrote this from her hospital bed. I thought you should have it. I read it. I won't share every word. Some things belong only to the people they were written for. But she wrote that she didn't know if she'd live to see me graduate, and she wanted to make sure I'd have the chance she never had. She wrote that I was the bravest person she'd ever known. My mother wrote that letter while dying. My father cashed the check it earned. I folded it carefully, put it in my bag, and said, Thank you, Dean Hartwell. You've earned more than a thank you, Stella. You've earned that stage. The final week was methodical. I treated it like a lab protocol. Steps in order, nothing skipped, no room for emotion to derail the process. Step 1. I practiced the real speech every night. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, hands flat on the sink, speaking to my own reflection until the words stopped feeling dangerous and started feeling true. Rachel sat cross-legged on the bath mat each time, nodding, occasionally wiping her eyes. You sure about this? She asked on Tuesday night. No, I said, but I'm done being sure about staying quiet. Step 2. With guidance from the university's legal services, I officially closed the joint account Gerald had controlled. The process required documentation, my signature, my ID, confirmation of student status. The bank representative asked if I wanted to notify the co-signer. No, I said. Step 3. I packed my dorm room. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. 6 years of living lean had taught me to travel light. I didn't leave anything behind. Step 4. I wrote a letter to Gerald. Clear, factual, no emotion. It stated that I was aware of the Pemberton Scholars Award, the disbursements, and his interception of the funds. It requested full repayment and informed him that I would no longer be in contact. I sealed it in an envelope and dated it for the day after graduation. The gold honor cord cost $25. I'd asked Gerald to send me the money weeks earlier. He'd refused. What do you need a fancy rope for? So I bought it myself with tip money from a catering shift. I hung it on the doorknob of my empty dorm room and looked at it in the dark. On Friday, Rachel texted me. He bought plane tickets, and he made a dinner reservation at Morton's for after. 5 guests, his friends. She added a second text. He had invitations printed. Of course he did. The night before graduation, I was alone. Rachel had left that morning. Her family arrived early, and she'd moved to their hotel for the night. The dorm room was bare. 2 stripped mattresses, empty shelves, the kind of silence that only exists in rooms that used to be full. I sat on my bed, just the fitted sheet left, and opened my mother's laptop one last time. I'd been through the emails, the documents, the scholarship application. But that night I found something I'd missed. A photo, buried in a folder labeled Stella. A selfie my mother had taken of the 2 of us when I was 15. We were in the kitchen. Flour on the counter, a lopsided cake between us, both of us grinning like the world was small and safe. She was already thinner than she should have been. I didn't notice at the time. I touched the screen like I could reach through it. I'm graduating tomorrow, Mom, I said to the empty room. I earned it. Like you wanted. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. Gerald. Remember, he said, read the speech I approved. Wear something nice. My friends will be there. And Stella, his voice dropped into that register he used when he wanted to sound generous. This is a big day for both of us. For both of us. Yes, Dad, I said. The words tasted like ash. It was the last time I'd ever say yes to him. After we hung up, I ironed my graduation gown. Not because it was wrinkled, the fabric was fine, but because I needed something to do with my hands at 2 a.m. The iron hissed back and forth. Steam curled. On the desk beside me, my mother's photo, my graduation cap, and 2 folded speeches, one a lie, one the truth. I didn't sleep. I watched the ceiling until the sky turned gray. 7 a.m. I put on the gown. The fabric was heavier than I expected, or maybe that was just the morning. I draped the gold honor cord across my shoulders and adjusted my cap in the mirror. The tassel hung to the right. After the ceremony, I'd move it to the left. That was the tradition. Right now, it stayed where it was. The auditorium at Millbrook State seats 2,200. When I arrived backstage at 8:15, I could already hear the low roar of families filling the bleachers, laughter, the squeak of folding seats, someone's toddler shrieking in delight. The stage was dressed for the occasion, university banners in navy and gold, a podium with the school seal, a long table with stacked diploma covers, rows of chairs for faculty in their academic regalia. Dean Hartwell found me in the staging area. She was wearing her doctoral robes, black with velvet chevrons, and she shook my hand with both of hers. "Everything is in place," she said quietly. "Security has been briefed. Just deliver your speech." Her eyes held mine, steady, an anchor. I looked out through the gap in the curtain. The auditorium was nearly full. 2,000 people, parents with cameras, siblings holding flowers, grandparents in their Sunday best. And there, dead center of the bleachers, Section C, row 12, my father. He was wearing a navy blazer with brass buttons, a red power tie. His hair was freshly cut. He looked like a man preparing to receive an award. Flanking him were 5 of his friends, men in their 50s, guys he played poker with, drank with, told stories to. The stories about his sacrifices, his money, his daughter. I noticed something on the empty seat beside him, a small card. I was too far away to read it, but later I'd learn what it said. Cordially invited to celebrate my daughter's graduation, made possible by Gerald Ingram. He'd had invitations printed, with his name larger than mine. Professor Colton, seated in the faculty section, caught my eye and gave me a single, firm nod. I touched the folded speech in my inside pocket, the real one, the one with truth in it. "Okay," I whispered. "To no one, to my mother. Let's go." Pomp and circumstance filled the auditorium like a wave. The processional began. I walked at the front, valedictorian's privilege, cap straight, shoulders back, gown brushing the floor. Behind me, 462 graduates filed in, 2 by 2, a river of black fabric and nervous grins. The audience rose, cameras flashed, parents craned their necks, scanning the line for their children. I kept my eyes forward, but I could hear Gerald, his voice carried like it always did, bellowing from the bleachers. "That's my daughter, right there, at the front." A few people around him smiled politely. His friends clapped. I climbed the stage steps and took my seat, the designated chair to the right of the podium, separated from the faculty row by a small table with a water pitcher and a glass. The stage felt enormous. Below me, 2,000 faces. Behind me, a banner. Millbrook State University, Commencement Ceremony, Class of 2025. The provost made opening remarks. A trustee read a citation. The university choir sang. I heard none of it. My pulse was a drumline. The folded speech in my pocket felt like it weighed 10 pounds. Then the MC, the associate dean, stepped to the podium. "It is my honor to introduce this year's valedictorian." Stella Ingram maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA over 4 years while working 3 concurrent jobs. She is graduating summa cum laude with departmental honors in biochemistry and has been awarded the university's highest academic distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, Stella Ingram. Working 3 concurrent jobs. I saw Gerald shift in his seat when the MC said it. His jaw tightened. That detail wasn't in the script he'd imagined. The one where his money made all of this possible and his daughter was simply talented enough to ride his generosity. I stood. I walked to the podium. I placed both palms flat on the wood. 2,000 people. Absolute quiet. I opened my mouth. 4 years ago, I said. I walked onto this campus with 2 suitcases, a used laptop, and 3 job applications already filled out. A few people chuckled. I wasn't joking, but it sounded like a humble beginning, the kind of opening audiences expect from valedictorians. It wasn't. It was the first line of the truth. I came here because of a woman who believed that education was the one thing no one could take from you. My mother, Margaret Ingram, was a high school biology teacher. She taught me that every equation has a solution, that every question deserves an honest answer, and that the hardest part of any experiment isn't the hypothesis. It's having the courage to look at the data. I paused. In the bleachers, a few parents were already dabbing their eyes. My mother's story wasn't complicated, a teacher who died too young. But it was real, and real things land differently than performance. She couldn't be here today, but everything I am started with her. I didn't look at Gerald when I said it. I didn't need to. I could feel him. I talked about the jobs, tutoring, the library, the catering shifts. I learned biochemistry in lecture halls, and I learned endurance in banquet kitchens. I served hors d'oeuvres at events where the napkins cost more than my weekly groceries. Every credit hour I earned twice. Once in the classroom, once on the clock. The audience was still, not uncomfortable, captivated. But in Section C, row 12, something was changing. Gerald Ingram had come to this ceremony to hear his name, to hear his daughter thank him publicly on a microphone in front of his friends and 2,000 witnesses. He was waiting for the line he'd approved. I couldn't have done this without my father's unwavering support. It never came. I watched, from the corner of my eye as his posture stiffened. His hands gripped his knees, his smile curdled. The friends beside him exchanged glances. Something was about to break. It happened between sentences. I had just finished saying, "Every dollar I spent on this education, I earned myself," when a sound cut through the auditorium like a gunshot. A chair, metal, folding, slammed upright against the bleacher behind it. And then a voice I'd been obedient to for 22 years roared across 2,000 people. "Don't clap! I paid for that degree, not her!" Gerald was standing, blazer unbuttoned, face crimson, veins visible in his neck even from the stage. He jabbed a finger toward me like he was scolding a child in a grocery store. Except the grocery store had 2,000 witnesses and a sound system. "She wouldn't have lasted one semester without my money," he shouted. "Everything she has, I gave her. That gown, that cord, that podium, I paid for all of it." The auditorium went silent so fast, it felt like the air had been sucked out. Someone dropped a program. A baby started crying 3 sections over. 2,000 heads turned toward Section C, row 12, toward a man in a navy blazer who had just detonated his own reputation and didn't know it yet. His 5 friends sat frozen. One of them, I'd learn later it was Frank Murdoch, slowly covered his face with his hand. I stood at the podium. The microphone was still on. I could hear my own breathing through the speakers, amplified, and I knew the audience could hear it too. My hands were trembling. I gripped the edges of the podium to stop them. My heart was slamming so hard I thought I might pass out. But I didn't cry. I looked down at the wood grain beneath my fingers. I looked at Dean Hartwell, seated to my left on the stage. She met my eyes and gave one nod, small, nearly imperceptible, but I saw it. I felt it. And I smiled. Not a wide smile, not a victorious one, the quiet kind. The kind that comes after you've been waiting for something to finally be over so the truth can start. I stepped back to the microphone. 7 words. I'd rehearsed them in the bathroom mirror for 3 weeks. I'd said them so many times they'd lost their shape and become pure sound, and then I'd said them more until they became something harder. Not just words, but a line drawn in the ground. I leaned into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. I paid for every cent myself. Silence. 3 full seconds of it. The kind of silence where you can hear the ventilation system humming. Then a murmur. Low at first, rippling through the audience like a stone dropped in water. Heads turning, eyebrows rising. People leaning toward each other. What did she say? Did you hear that? I kept going, steady, like reading data aloud in a lab. 3 jobs, 4 years, every tuition payment, every textbook, every meal. The financial records are on file with the dean's office. I turned slightly, not fully toward Gerald, but enough. And the Pemberton Scholars Award, the full-ride merit scholarship my mother applied for before she died, the one that covered my entire education? My voice stayed level. Those funds were intercepted and cashed by someone else. The disbursement records, with signatures, are also on file. I didn't say his name. I didn't need to. Every person in that auditorium knew who I was looking at. Gerald stood in the bleachers, mouth open, no sound coming out. The crimson drained from his face and left it gray. He looked like a man who had just heard a door lock behind him. The murmurs became a wave. I could hear fragments. Did she say stolen? The scholarship? Oh my God! In the far corner of the bleachers, my great-aunt Helen pressed both hands over her mouth and began to cry. Professor Colton, in the faculty section, didn't move. She just closed her eyes for a long moment, the way you do when something you suspected turns out to be true, and the confirmation hurts anyway. I stepped back from the microphone. You didn't pay for my degree, Dad. Quiet, clear, final. You stole from it. Dean Hartwell stood. She didn't rush. She didn't make a spectacle of it. She rose from her chair with the unhurried gravity of someone who had prepared for this moment and placed herself at the second microphone on the stage, the one reserved for administrative remarks. If I may, she said. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the kind of voice that fills a room without raising itself. 2,000 people turned back toward the stage. I can confirm that the university has completed an internal investigation into the disbursement of a merit-based scholarship awarded to Miss Ingram. The Pemberton Scholars Award, a full-ride scholarship valued at $124,000, was applied to Miss Ingram's tuition account each semester as intended. However, the accompanying stipend funds were deposited into a joint account with an authorized cosigner who was not the student. She paused. That matter has been referred to the appropriate authorities. She didn't say Gerald's name. She didn't need to. The entire auditorium knew who was standing in Section C, Row 12, because every head had already turned. 2 campus security officers, I noticed them only now, though they must have been positioned near the aisle before the ceremony began, were already moving. They walked calmly up the bleacher steps toward Gerald, one on each side. Sir, the first officer said, loud enough for the nearby rows to hear, please come with us. Gerald's face cycled through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, then rage, then something I'd never seen on him before, fear. This is my daughter's graduation, he sputtered. You can't. I have a right to be here. Sir, you're being asked to leave the venue. They flanked him, polite but immovable. Gerald looked around for his friends, the 5 men he'd invited to witness his triumph. Not one of them stood. Not one of them looked at him. Frank Murdoch sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. Gerald was escorted down the bleacher steps, past rows of silent families, past mothers clutching their programs, past fathers who held their children a little tighter as he passed. The metal doors at the back of the auditorium opened and then closed, and the sound echoed through the silence like a period at the end of a sentence. On the empty seat in Section C, Row 12, a small printed card lay face up, made possible by Gerald Ingram. No one picked it up. The auditorium was still. Dean Hartwell stepped back from the microphone and nodded to me, a gesture that said, "This is still your stage." I returned to the podium. My hands were no longer shaking. Something had released in my chest, a knot I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I'd like to finish, I said. 2,000 people gave me their silence. It felt different from the silence before, warmer, like the room was holding its breath not from shock, but from care. I reached into the inside pocket of my graduation gown and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the printout of my mother's letter to the Pemberton Foundation. I'd carried it against my heart through the processional, through the speech, through everything. When my mother applied for the scholarship that paid for my education, she was in the hospital. She had stage 4 lung cancer. She had weeks left. My voice caught, just barely, and I let it. She wrote a letter to the selection committee. I'd like to share part of it. I looked down at her handwriting, photocopied but still unmistakably hers, the slight forward lean of her cursive, the way she crossed her T's with long, confident strokes. She wrote, I don't know if I'll be alive when my daughter starts college, but I know she'll get there. I'm asking you to make sure she has the chance I won't be there to give her. Something broke open in that auditorium. I could hear it, a wave of emotion that moved through 2,000 people at once. Faculty members removed their glasses. Strangers reached for each other's hands. In the front row, a woman I'd never met was openly weeping. Professor Colton pressed a tissue to her eyes. Aunt Helen, in the back, was sobbing. Decades of guilt and suspicion finally given a name. I folded the letter. She couldn't walk me to campus, I said. So she paved the road instead. The standing ovation began in the faculty section and rolled outward like a tide. 2,000 people rose. The sound was enormous. Not just applause, but something louder than applause. Recognition, witness. I stood at the podium and let it wash over me. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel like I was carrying anything alone. After the ceremony, after the diplomas were conferred, the tassels moved, the caps thrown, I walked into the reception area with my gown unzipped and my honor cord still around my neck. Classmates hugged me. Strangers shook my hand. A woman with tears still on her face said, "Your mother raised a warrior." And I held it together just barely. Then a man I didn't immediately recognize appeared at my elbow. He was in his late 50s, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair and the ruddy complexion of someone who spent weekends on a boat. He was wearing a sport coat that didn't quite fit, the sleeves too short, the buttons straining. One of Gerald's 5 guests. "Miss Ingram? I'm Frank Murdoch. I was a friend of your father's." "I know who you are, Mr. Murdoch." He couldn't look me in the eye. His gaze kept drifting to the floor, to the wall, anywhere. "I want you to know, I've had doubts for a while. Your dad always talked about how much he was sacrificing, how expensive you were, but last year he bought a fishing boat, cash, and I thought, where's that money coming from? An insurance adjuster?" He shook his head. "I didn't ask. I should have." He reached into his jacket and pulled out one of Gerald's custom invitations, the little card with "Made Possible by Gerald Ingram" in embossed lettering. He held it between 2 fingers, then tore it slowly in half and dropped the pieces into the nearest trash can. "I believed him for 20 years, Frank said. "That's on me." He offered his hand. I shook it. His grip was uncertain, almost apologetic. "He told us, you know. After you graduated, his plan was to have you manage a laundromat he was looking at buying." Frank's mouth twisted. A laundromat? For a girl who just graduated valedictorian in biochemistry. He walked away. No drama, no redemption arc, just a man who admitted he'd looked the other way and couldn't do it anymore. I watched him cross the parking lot alone. None of Gerald's other friends came to speak to me, but none of them went looking for Gerald either. 2 weeks after graduation, the machinery started turning. The county district attorney's office opened a formal case against Gerald Ingram. The charges: theft by deception, $124,000 in scholarship funds fraudulently intercepted over 4 years, and theft of services for the approximately $38,000 I'd earned and sent him under false pretenses. If he'd used the U.S. Postal Service to receive any of the disbursement checks, mail fraud charges were also on the table. My father's Sunday phone calls about sacrifice and duty had built a paper trail that now led to a prosecutor's desk. Millbrook State University issued a formal statement confirming that I had been the victim of scholarship diversion and that the matter had been referred to law enforcement. The university's emergency student fund reimbursed me $38,000, my 4 years of earnings, pending recovery from Gerald. It wasn't a gift. It was restitution through the institution, and they'd recoup it when the legal process concluded. The Pemberton Scholars Foundation responded with an announcement that they would implement direct-to-student disbursement protocols for all future awards. No more co-signed accounts, no more intermediaries. My case became the reason. Gerald hired a defense attorney. The retainer alone was reportedly north of $15,000. His fishing boat, the cash purchase Frank Murdoch had found suspicious, was identified as a potential asset for seizure. The new patio furniture, the F-150, the flat screen in my old bedroom, all purchased during the years the scholarship checks were landing. I didn't follow every development. I didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves, just as Dean Hartwell had promised. What I focused on instead was the offer letter sitting on my kitchen counter, a research associate position at a biotech lab in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Starting salary, $65,000. Benefits: a 401k. My name on published papers. I signed it the same day I signed the lease on my first apartment. A studio with a window that overlooked a parking lot, which doesn't sound like much, but it was mine. Every square foot of it was mine. The call came a month later. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me, the part that was still, after everything, a daughter, picked up. You destroyed me. Gerald's voice was flat, stripped of the bluster I'd grown up under. No warmth, no charm, no performance. Just a man talking from whatever room he was sitting in, alone. In front of everyone. In front of my friends. You humiliated me, Stella. I am your father. I was standing in my studio apartment. The evening light came through the window and fell across the kitchen counter where my offer letter sat, already signed. My mother's photo, the selfie from the kitchen, the one with flour and cake, was taped to the wall above my desk. You are my father, I said. That's exactly why this hurts. Everything I did was for you. You stole $124,000 from a scholarship Mom applied for while she was dying. You took $38,000 I earned working 3 jobs. You told me I owed you. You told everyone you sacrificed for me. None of it was true. I raised you. You didn't pay for my education. The records prove it, and I'm done arguing about facts. There was a silence on the line. Not the comfortable kind. Not the kind that means understanding. The kind that means a wall has been hit. You'll regret this, he said. You'll come back. No, I said. I won't. I ended the call. Set the phone on the counter, stared at it for a long time. This small rectangle that had carried 6 years of guilt trips and Sunday interrogations and demands. This tiny machine through which a man had controlled his daughter from 4 hours away. Then I blocked the number. I didn't cry. I'd done my crying. What I felt was something quieter and larger, like stepping out of a building you'd been locked inside for so long you forgot there was weather. I looked at my mother's photo on the wall. I'm okay, Mom, I said. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet I got to choose. 6 months later, I am someone I recognize. I work at the biotech lab. I wear a white coat with my name embroidered on the pocket, Stella Ingram, Research Associate, Department of Molecular Biology. And every morning when I clip my ID badge to my lanyard, I think about a girl taping her sneakers together with duct tape so she could carry champagne flutes across a ballroom. That girl got me here. I owe her everything. My apartment has furniture now, not much, but mine. A desk from a secondhand store, a bookshelf I assembled myself, a small succulent Rachel brought when she visited last month, still somehow alive despite my best efforts. She walked in, looked around at my 380 square feet, and said, "It's perfect." She meant it. I could tell because she wasn't crying. I started therapy. I resisted at first. I told myself I was fine. I'd handled it. It was over. But my therapist, Dr. Nolan, said something in our first session that I keep coming back to. Survival isn't the same as processing. You survived it. Now we need to let your nervous system know it's over. She's right. 6 years of hypervigilance doesn't just evaporate because you move to a new city. Aunt Helen calls every Sunday now. She apologized for not speaking up sooner. She'd suspected something for years but couldn't prove it and didn't want to overstep. I told her I understood. I did. Silence in the face of power is a survival strategy I know intimately. As for Gerald, last I heard, he was negotiating a plea deal with the DA. Probation, mandatory restitution, community service. His attorney was arguing that a prison sentence would make repayment impossible. I don't know the outcome. I don't check. That chapter closed the moment I stepped off that stage. I don't owe it any more of my attention. So, that's the story. If you've made it this far, I want to sit with you for 1 more minute. Not to lecture, not to give advice, just to tell you a few things I learned. The kind of things you can only learn by living through something you didn't choose. I used to believe that silence was loyalty, that enduring mistreatment from someone who was supposed to love you was the same as honoring them. It isn't. Silence in the face of injustice isn't respect. It's a prison you build around yourself, one yes, dad, at a time. The day I stopped saying yes was the day I started breathing. I also learned this. Keep your records, keep your emails, keep your pay stubs. Keep every piece of paper that tells the truth about your life, because there will come a day when someone tries to rewrite your story, and you'll need the receipts. Documents don't lie, people do. Let the paperwork speak. And maybe most importantly, setting a boundary with someone you love is not an act of war. It's an act of survival. I didn't cut my father out of my life because I hated him. I did it because I finally loved myself enough to stop letting him take what wasn't his. If you're in a situation like mine, if someone is using guilt or obligation or family as a tool to control you, know this: you are not alone. And you don't owe anyone your silence. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button. Not for me, but so the algorithm carries it to someone who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe and tap the bell if you want more stories like this one. And check the description. There's another one waiting for you that I think you'll understand. My name is Stella Ingram. I graduated from Millbrook State University, summa cum laude, with a 4.0 GPA, 3 jobs on my resume, and a full-ride scholarship my dying mother fought for. I earned every cent, and now the record shows it.